Welcome to Talking New York Real Estate with Vince Rocco. Our show is all about the exciting world of real estate and in particular, how it relates to the luxury New York marketplace. But if you are not planning a real estate transaction in New York, we still have plenty of information you can use no matter where you are. Now, here's our show. Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome my listeners and viewers in the United States and all around the world. I am Vince Rocco, and it is Tuesday morning here in New York City, so let's go behind the headlines and get the real story. Today, we are talking about the latest update and predictions on our markets here in New York City. But first, this is Talking New York Real Estate, and up front today, the New York City real estate market in 2024 is characterized by a mix of resilience and adaptation. Despite fluctuations due to economic uncertainties and rising interest rates, the market remains at a standstill. The luxury sector, however, is performing well, with notable transactions in high-end condominiums and townhouses. Rental markets show strong activity, with rents rising again after a dip during the pandemic, fueled by the city's gradual return to normalcy and renewed interest in urban living. New York City's real estate market is navigating a complex landscape, balancing recovery and growth during evolving economic conditions. Also today, a buyer's market in New York City occurs when the supply of properties exceeds the demand, giving buyers the upper hand in negotiation. In these markets, property prices typically stabilize or decrease, providing more opportunities for buyers and investors to find favorable deals. But guess what? They don't buy in these markets. We will discuss that and so much more as Talking New York Real Estate gets underway on this very hot, steamy Tuesday morning.
Said it, Vince.
And in the news this morning, borrowers are now facing more scrutiny by banks. Banks are combing through finance documents even more closely these days than ever, according to Jonathan Miller, who is president and CEO of appraisal firm Miller Samuel. In the current market, credit conditions are the tightest they've been in years, he says. Since the Federal Reserve began raising interest rates, credit has gotten even tighter as rates have increased. Banks are now often looking for reasons to back out of lending to you the money that they've already committed to, even up to and at the closing table. It's always about location, 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 but you can get to Roosevelt Island by subway, tram, ferry, or car if you want to. But even though the island is just a 3-minute subway ride to the first stop in Manhattan, it's not on the radar for many New Yorkers or apartment hunters in New York. Part of the issue is a lingering assumption that apartment buildings on Roosevelt Island are all public housing, thanks to the island's former Mitchell-Lama buildings, which were built in the 1970s. But there has been several waves of new development and new construction, making the island a place that today's renters and buyers are now considering. All right, and Governor Kathy Hochul last Tuesday allocated $54 million to immediately restart work on the 2nd Avenue subway extension, which will bring the Q train from 96th Street to 125th Street in East Harlem. The new funding allows the MTA to reallocate utility lines along 2nd Avenue in preparation for the next phase of the transit project. The MTA stopped work on the project last month after the governor indefinitely paused the start of congestion pricing. The $1 billion in projected annual revenue from the program was intended to fund the project. From the top of a convertible Bing and Bing building only here in New York at 302 West 12th Street, the view from the charming penthouse condo is elevated even more by a sprawling wraparound terrace. It is asking $4.5 million. It's a one-bedroom home in a classic village gem, and it's on the market for the first time since the iconic 1931 building was converted to condos in 1986. It's a great building, but oy vey, the price. And a former Catholic church in the East Village is set to become a residential development with more than 500 affordable housing units. The Archbishop of New York on Wednesday announced that the parish of St. Bridget, St. Emmerich sold the vacant church and school campus at 181 Avenue D to a joint venture that will do the conversion. The project will include homes for seniors and formerly homeless individuals, including those with special needs who qualify for supportive services.
I like that.
And finally, in entertainment news, always entertainment news, we bring you a full circle moment. It was announced last week. Carrie Underwood won American Idol 20 years ago, and now she will join the judges' table for the upcoming new season. Season 25 will begin in January with Underwood replacing Katy Perry, who bowed out after 7 successful seasons, to focus back on her music. Underwood will join Luke Bryan and Lionel Richie, and of course the host, Ryan Seacrest. All is good at American Idol. And this one can't wait for season 25. This is a whole nother story for another day. With me today at the table are Scott Harris from Brown Harris Stevens, Michael Vargas from Vanderbilt Appraisals, Jordan Shea from Douglas Elliman, and the one and only Tracie Hamersley from Douglas Elliman. All right, everybody. So today we're going to talk about some of the changes in our marketplace. I mean, we can talk about this every week. Since the last, I'd say, 2 years, things have really changed completely between interest rates rising, interest rates stabilizing. Now everybody waiting for interest rates to come down to refuel the marketplace. As I said at the top of the show in the opening, the ultra luxury market, $5, $6, $10 million and up, seems to be purring along really nicely. All cash deals for the most part. But the lower end, and I hate to use the word lower end, but the $1 million to $2 million and under.
So low end.
So low end. I mean, really unbelievable. But, that's kind of struggling because of interest rates. I'm going to get into a little bit about that. As a result of all of that, it's also very difficult for, values of apartments to stay where they need to be. So we're going to talk to Michael Vargas, who is here from Vanderbilt Appraisals. He's been in this industry for 100 years like I have. And we want to understand how he comes up with the proper, true value of homes and how we get those sellers out there and buyers, for the most part, to understand or accept what, the real value or the true value should be. So, there are several contributing factors, okay, that affect value, in my opinion. One is, market fluctuations, interest rates, of course. Inventory levels, right? We sometimes are depleted with inventory, so that absolutely has an effect, I believe, on value. Neighborhood trends, what's hot, what's not. And, regulatory changes. Remote work trends, which seems to be trending back to people coming to the office. So that means they're, closer to where they want to buy homes again here in New York City. And economic uncertainty, which we've all been experiencing for the past, 2 years. So, Michael, in your opinion, and that's a whole mouthful here, but what is really affecting the true values of apartments these days here in New York City? How are we approaching that in appraisals, and where do you see it landing at some point?
Well, I mean, everything that you just mentioned, those are all like ingredients that would go in an appraisal or things that we would consider, market fluctuations, interest rates, economic performance, inventory levels, job growth, things like that. So all of that, are things that we consider as far as what values today might be. The difficult thing with appraisals is that, they're just inherently backward looking. So we're usually, we're tasked with figuring out what the value of a property is today based on what people did 3 months ago or 6 months ago or even a year ago. And
I was going to ask you about the timeline because we used to go back a couple years, but then it got to be a year and then it got to be 6 months and maybe in some cases 3 months.
Yeah, usually, you want to find the most recent data. Yesterday's contract signed is the best, arbiter of what value is today. Right. But, then you can sometimes run into situations like yesterday we had a very volatile day in the stock market. And globally, not just the local
global
markets.
Yeah, global.
And there's now fears of an economic recession on the horizon with a worse than expected or disappointing labor report last week. So now there's talk. The talk about a recession is back on the table. And, so as an appraiser, we have to think what are the implications of that going forward? So we're trying to figure out a value today, but we're not, as I said, we're always backwards looking, but we have to think about, also what's going to happen in the next 3 months. And that's the hard thing to do. So, with respect to where values stand today, we start with inventory levels. And I've heard people, for a long time now, probably in the last 2 years, talk about Manhattan in particular as being a low inventory environment. And, it is low inventory in just absolute numbers because sometimes we've had markets with 10,000 listings, 12,000 listings. Now we have 7,000 listings. So that sounds like low inventory. But whether the market has low or high inventory is relative to the pace of sales. So if we have 7,000 listings and only 700 sell in a month or go into contract, that's a 10-month supply of housing. That's not really a low inventory environment.
And I wanted to, I was going to mention that because a lot of people say there's not a lot of inventory. You know, the agents will all say there's not a lot of inventory, not much to show, whatever. But the fact of the matter is there is enough inventory, in my opinion, but people just aren't buying.
Yes, I think the feeling on the ground from agents and the buyers is that there's not enough inventory, which really means I haven't found anything that I like, or I haven't found anything that I like at the price that I want to pay for it. And so that's a big difference. You know, low inventory environment, like in the suburbs, you might have 30 houses on the market and 15 go into contract.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's like a 1 or 2 month supply. That's low inventory. So that's not what we haven't been having. Right now we have, you know, a 10-month supply, 7,000 listings, 700 go into contract. And a 10-month supply is, you know, it's a buyer's market. But
as I said at the top of the show, and buyers in a buyer's market don't buy. And we'll talk about that maybe later.
And I think that, you know, again, part of the problem is they're not finding the values or the prices that, you know, that they had hoped to find. Although I think that was more the case in 2022, 2023. But I think, you know, over the last couple months, we've seen, you know, more price reductions, more properties that are coming on the market at prices that are lower than what people paid for them. And I think that's kind of a sign that maybe we're getting to a point where, you know, the price might be more attractive to the buy side. And in which case you should see a higher rate of contract signings from, you know, 700 a month, you know, up to 900 a month soon.
But I often think, you know, that it's more of a people problem than it's not. I mean, we all have expectations. We've all lived long enough in this industry here in New York City to follow the trends of up and down and up and down. But what we really don't ever see is price plummet. They don't crash to the ground. I mean, even during major pandemic, it didn't happen. Back to 9/11, it didn't happen. Back to the major financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, it didn't happen. Corrections happen. And more often than not, it's because sellers have overpriced anyway, and they're never going to get it regardless of what the market called for then. So you see corrections, but you don't see prices plummet. I do believe that buyers put an expectation in their mind. And again, this is my opinion, okay? The reason I think that they don't buy so quickly in a buyer's market is because they're still sitting back waiting for those prices to drop. Well, you know, Vince says the value of the apartment is X. I think it should be lower. Well, what you think it should be based on what the market is telling you it is, you're wrong. I agree with you. My family lives in Westchester. I'm all over Westchester most weekends, and I see the market up there is on fire. I mean, every price point, every neighborhood on fire hot. And I sit back and I think, well, okay, what's wrong with New York City? And I really, you know, I get our prices are higher, but Scott, opinion.
It's a loaded question.
Well, it's a loaded question, but there's got to be answers. In order for us to correct this or fix this, there's got to be answers.
Let's put yourself in the mindset of buyers. You know, as much as you're saying prices of properties don't plummet, it's true. They gradually move in a direction,
right?
And rates suddenly jump. You know, you have those two things, those two moving pieces that move in at different speeds. So buyers are still, I think, reeling in some way from the shock of what happened 2 years ago. It was so quick and so unbelievable.
Yeah.
And even now, when I think we have there's a little light at the end of the tunnel, I think buyers are still kind of feeling shocked. And of course, there's been kind of a lot of world events. There's a lot to sort of shock the system. So I think buyers are still reeling in a way from that. And there's not enough news stories yet, or an accumulation of news stories to sort of encourage buyers. And it's going to take the efforts of brokers, agents across the country. I mean, it's in New York. It's also the cost, but it's not just the cost of the property. I think there's been some shock about the cost, just the carrying costs. Buildings have been suddenly raising their maintenance to catch up. These 100-year-old buildings are starting to need more maintenance, and then you've got, I mean, there are a lot of moving pieces that are, the rise of monthly costs are much faster than people can sort of process.
They are. And you know, if you're in the business long enough, like I am, you get to see all the ups and downs of all the different marketplaces. But I remember way back, 20 years ago, 18 years ago, the minute because you mentioned, not enough news stories, the minute the New York Times would write an article, the minute the Wall Street Journal would write an article about the market, in New York City, it changed the market drastically, either in this direction up or in this direction down immediately. And so it's kind of like, that was going on for years and years and years. And I remember saying, I'm not reading that New York Times anymore because I'm sick and tired of how it affects my industry.
They used to like to say that everything was going to be frothy and they were looking for all, I mean, it was they were trying to make it a self-fulfilling prophecy and it wasn't that way. But
it was not, right. But they thought that what they were doing was directing buyers and or sellers in one direction or another, which,
Correct.
in my opinion, they were just confusing, the mix.
I do want to say something, and Michael, maybe you can corroborate this as well, that in the really tight years, 2020, 2021, before we got that big meteoric spike, the prices were not plummeting, but I personally know I had some listings that we took offers that were severely below, significantly below, many, many percentage points below our asking price, which might not have moved, but the actual close price was actually what in some lenses would look like a price plummet. But Michael, I had a question. Of that, say, your illustrative 7,000 current listings, how much of that is new construction right now?
Good question.
I mean, I think from the 7,000 listings, I think maybe 20% are, yeah. I mean, just for brand new construction, but that's not all of the inventory for new developments.
Is that New York City or is that Manhattan? The 7,000.
Manhattan.
It's Manhattan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think
continuing to build, and there's more and more new construction.
I mean, there's going to be more inventory that's not out there yet for the new condos, but not to any significant levels that we're talking about a huge amount of shadow inventory for new development. We're not really in the new development market. I think over the last 5 years, has reached a point where many of the buildings have had adequate absorption, and so there's not a huge shadow supply of unsold units. So yeah, that measure of 7,000 listings is really, what the market, the universe of buyers and the universe of sellers today can kind of see as the competition that's out there, and the kind of competition that the agents can kind of review and see what's available to show buyers, or how to counsel their sellers on how to price accordingly with the according to their competition that's out there. So it's a good level of supply, and the advantage is to the buyers now, but it can change quickly. Those absorption rates can change, if interest rates go down, and then there's less volatility in the market and a little bit more certainty about the economic conditions, then, getting to 1,000 contracts in a month now brings you down to a 7-month supply. And then you're back to neutral. You're back to a neutral market. So those kind of, shifts of inventory and demand, can be somewhat volatile as well. But I think it's, pretty clear for the last 2 years. I mean, I think probably since mid-2022, I think the general sense is that, the market here is overvalued, meaning the sellers have to bring prices down, but they don't, as you were mentioning, it's very rare that there's a huge spike downward, 10 or 20%. Right. That's very rare. I mean, it's just an illiquid asset anyway, even though we kind of follow it the way the stock market, yesterday, a stock could be down 20%, and immediately from the day to day what its performance is. In real estate, it's really more of kind of a long, either, a slow appreciation or a slow decline. And that's what we've been in for 2 years, is kind of a long, slow downward trend, sometimes flat, sometimes a little down. Sometimes there's a spike of interest, and you get, more activity. But, that's the way real estate and housing works anyway, is that we tend to follow it on a quarterly basis by saying, here's the increase in the average, here's the decrease in the median. Mm-hmm. And we tend to track it, the way we track the stock market, looking at it every day and wondering what's it doing. But it's really
Up on the scale every day.
yeah, it's just a
It's
long
for people who don't have enough to do with their day.
That's
I
right.
get it. It's kind of crazy. But I do have a question for you based on and then I have one for Jordan on the new development side. The 20% that you say, apartments in Manhattan, new development, how many of those are unsold units like for a while ago and versus how many are brand new to market? Because we have not seen a lot of new developments opening these days. Yes, some have. But not a lot. And there's still a lot of older developments out there that have a lot of unsold units. So do you have any percentage difference on what's brand new or unsold?
I don't really know. I don't have that breakdown. You should have prepared me with that question. Then I would have done my research. So I'm not really. I'm not really sure. I mean, I think what we've been seeing.
You can say I don't know, but I'll get back to you.
Yeah,
That's okay.
What have we been seeing with what's been selling? It's it's been 50% co-ops, 50% condos.
Yeah.
And so, the current inventory is probably similar, maybe 60-40, but a lot of the condos are resales.
Yeah.
And as far as a brand new unit that's never been lived in, where, it's being offered by the developer, they have competition also from units that were maybe purchased 3 years ago or even 5 years ago. I mean, really, the new development market is like a 5-year cycle from the time, start selling and marketing, let's say in 2018, 2019. So now we're really at the end of that new development cycle where, what's been sold has been sold and what's left is left to be sold.
Right.
But I don't think that's really, at levels that would weigh the market down. I think that most projects have been successful or have at least reached absorption levels that they can, continue to offer what they have left without any kind of panic.
Jordan and I were talking before the show about a new development he just opened. So, Jordan, a couple of questions to you. So tell us about the development, where it is, Midtown East, and you were indicating to me that sales are robust.
Well, that's Turtle Bay to you, sir.
Important distinction.
No, I will say that sales have been robust.
I lived in Turtle Bay. It's kind of nice. I like it.
For us, because there's developers by happenstance happen to tap into a market inefficiency for that particular neighborhood, which is brand new units that are efficient in size, right? So by having efficient units where the layouts make a lot of sense, where they're not sprawling, we're able to suppress the overall sales price, which makes, in turn, our product very attractive. And sort of not to...
It's a great entry point.
It's a great entry point, not to carrot the horse for later or jump on a future position on this, but not every foreign purchaser is an oligarch, and not every foreign purchaser wants to plunk down 5, 6, 7. They don't want to spend necessarily $4 million for a 2-bedroom apartment, right? And in that neighborhood, it just doesn't make sense. A lot of the lingering supply that we've seen from the new development sector is actually now getting absorbed simply because there is not resupply of the new development sector because of the interest rate rise, making these developments very hard to pencil. So because of that blip, it's actually benefited the new development side of the business, which is why I do think that you see this tale of two markets, the resale market and the new development market. The new development market typically, at least in my experience, those purchasers, as a general rule, do not rely on outside financing, right? The balance of those purchases, more than not, if even it's 51%, I'm right. Don't utilize.
You're always right, Jordan.
Don't utilize a mortgage. So therefore, this like trickle down effect where we actually benefit from higher interest rates.
What is
we're going to talk about cash buyers and a lot more when we come back from a break. But this is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network here in New York City. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
All right, before the break, we were talking about, there are people who need to finance and there are people who pay cash at every price point. Scott, I wanted to ask you, because you dabble in the very high end a lot. What are you hearing from buyers who are all cash? And again, depending on what they're looking at, whatever the price point is, why are they all cash? What is their what is their justification these days to do that? And do they think that they may be getting better discounts on overall purchase prices, or do they just not want to deal with interest rates, not want to deal with financing? There are people out there who buy cars all cash because they don't want to deal with that either. What is the impetus for these people, more so today than ever, in your opinion?
Well, there was a recent Bloomberg article that talked about a rise in the amount of properties being financed. So like 15% over the last quarters, like a slight bump in people financing. So I think some people are like, let's just finance because I can. But yes, I think generally what we're seeing is that people at that level it's not that they're not financing, but they're usually financing through a wealth advisor. They're leveraging their assets in a way that actually gives them a slightly lower price point, and they're like kicking the can down the road if they want to finance. If you're buying a primary home, there's some tax benefits to financing. So people usually finance up to that level, but a lot of this is happening behind the scenes. But yes, it's a hassle. And people have made a lot of money in the last few years, and they have the liquidity to do it, so they're buying cash.
Buyers are saying to me, a couple, not all, are saying to me, and I want your opinion on this. So Vince, because of the state of the current interest rate, whatever, does it make sense for me to pay cash now, and then maybe a year from now, 2 years from now, take money back in a mortgage because maybe the interest rates will be reduced and I don't have to pay that higher price? Are you hearing that at all?
So what I'll just give you kind of the math. I'm not going to go into the math too much, but what I would say, if you think about it, there are actual closing costs that are not insignificant when you buy a condo.
Right.
So it's like you need to decide. You need to be judicious. When am I going to finance? Because if I think I'm going to refinance, there's title insurance. There's some costs that sort of add up, especially once you get into these, to higher price points.
Right.
So it's a matter of like, I've got this one bullet in the gun. I don't want to spend 3 or 4% of a purchase price or a financed amount. It's $100,000. I mean, there's a reason why somebody became wealthy, because they made some smart decisions. So they're thinking about, when am I going to finance if I believe that mortgage rates are going to come down later? So I think people are absolutely doing that calculus and saying, I'm going to finance later, not now.
And even if you put pencil to paper today on a spreadsheet, which a lot of people are doing based on higher interest rates and higher purchase prices, whatever, it may make sense even with, some closing cost a year from now or 2 years from now, because the money they're saving potentially over that 1 or 2 or 3 year period before they refinance, maybe it all pencils out and maybe it makes sense. I don't know.
Perhaps. You asked the other question, which I think is important to answer for anybody who's listening. Are people getting better deals if they're paying cash?
Correct.
I'm not seeing that. I think there is some confidence in closing.
Right.
People say, I don't need a mortgage contingency. I'm confident I'm going to close.
Right.
Buyers will feel more comfortable in those circumstances, but in high-end condos, I mean, we can take there's some very successful condos, and those developers are not budging on prices. Period. They're like, we're not negotiating.
Right.
And then you have other things. Michael was talking about kind of being at the end of the timeline for some of these developers. They've cut their prices. They priced them in 2019 before COVID. And now they're like, all right, we're going to adjust our prices and get this last tranche of things sold. So I think buyers are feeling, in certain circumstances, they're getting enough value to move ahead anyway. And there's so many properties that are priced below what people paid. I think buyers the smart money anyway, is feeling pretty confident about where things are right now and making moves.
I agree.
I would agree as well. I will say that I think that's the difference between new dev and resale, is that cash is king regardless. I mean, if by chance you have multiple bids, you're going to go with the cash buyer no matter what, or I always would if all other things considered equal. But in resales, maybe there are definitely developers who are not budging with their new construction, even if it's a cash buyer. But I am seeing that we are negotiating, at least my sellers are negotiating a little bit more if someone is cash and can guarantee a quicker closing. Like I do still see a little advantage there. Not a sick discount, not as some cash buyers might want to come into the market thinking, but a bit of a discount for resale.
Tracie, I was going to ask you, Michael mentioned before, one of the factors that contribute to the value of the home and how things appraise out at the end,
Sure.
Before, closing, whatever. what neighborhood trends was one of, the contributing factors. In your opinion, in your book of business, where you are selling and renting, what neighborhoods are trending more today than have been in the past?
Sure.
And why?
Well, I would say, definitely the tried and true neighborhoods are still holding up their value. The West Village, downtown, certainly anywhere in the park on either east or west side. But Nomad definitely had its moment. 7, 8, 5 years ago. You say that. I do still think kind of Flatiron, Chelsea, Gramercy, New Dev, and resales. That's still very popular for a lot of people. Because it's kind of affordable luxury. And so I mean, that happens to be where I own 2 condos and do a fair amount of business, but that I am seeing that is still trending. I would love for the financial district to have more of a moment. I believe in the Seaport and the FIDI very strongly. And it's still not a 24/7 neighborhood there. I would call it an 18/6 joint. You disagree?
It's still not. I worked down there, in the 90s.
Excuse me, Mr. Upper East Side.
It was all business, and I agree with you. But I think FIDI did have their moment for a while. It went from, 30% residential to maybe 70, and it took a while, but they had their moment. I also would like to see that, but then I also sit back and say, and again, no offense anybody, who wants to live there? It's great from a commutation perspective.
Yes.
The trains are amazing, but there really isn't like as you said before, a 24/7 kind of vibe of restaurants and bars.
That's an easy walk too.
Well, but if you're close enough to walk to Tribeca, in some cases you are, in some cases you're not. I happen to like it down there. I just don't think that there's enough going on.
I will also say that was clearly showing my Manhattan-centric focus. Brooklyn is still very, very hot. You named the neighborhood.
Well, Brooklyn.
I'm always wishing I had more listings in Brooklyn because no matter what's going on, new dev, resale, there are lots of buyers there who are really focusing on that over
Brooklyn
Manhattan.
is like, I love and adore Brooklyn, and it never changes. I mean, once it got to be Brooklyn, popular Brooklyn from a real estate perspective.
The opposite of the bridge and tunnel side of the equation, according to some Brooklynites.
But it never
Manhattan
converted back. Well, I'm old enough to remember when people my age were running out of Brooklyn.
Fever, baby.
There you go. Okay, I didn't want to mention the name of it, but running out of Brooklyn because they didn't want anything to do with it. I grew up here and I don't want to live here. Gotta go. I love it. If I can go that way myself, I would. Jordan, in your opinion, what are trendy neighborhoods in your book of business right now that are hotter than maybe 6 months ago or a year ago?
Turtle Bay.
Kips Bay.
Man. Gangbusters, to quote myself.
Everyone moved to Turtle Bay.
Did you say to quote yourself?
Yeah.
Thank you for underscoring that.
I was going to say, thank you, Scott. She did say that.
He often quotes himself.
Yeah, to quote me. I've just seen a lot of interest on the Upper East Side over the last 18 months, I'd say.
Yeah.
That's really...
Another neighborhood that's come and gone.
It has their cycle's a bit longer than most, but it's come back.
Listen, the Second Avenue subway train made a huge impact.
It certainly did.
Finally kicked in.
It absolutely did.
I would almost say that traffic congestion made a larger impact because people who send their kids to school up there, the amount of time that they would spend in a car. You used to be able to commute from Tribeca, take your kid uptown to school, and now it's just such a hassle and you can't really do it. So it's just better to live in the neighborhood, right?
And many people have come from Tribeca
downtown
for school purposes to the Upper East Side.
And now there's finally luxury and hyper luxury new product on the Upper East Side, which we can
I was going to say
thank Neftali for.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that
Tyler's a genius.
I think the other thing that has kind of promoted a resurgence there are those 3 or 4 super high end buildings along 3rd and 2nd Avenue, because that also brings neighborhood services. It brings better restaurants, better bars, better stores,
brings everything.
Better shops. So
which always had a great vibe up there anyway. But you're right, it's bringing even more. But from your perspective, Michael, what when you look at all these deals that come across your desk or through your office, where are most of them happening? The brokers are telling us where they're seeing it from their perspective, but where are you seeing more of it, from a collection of deals?
Right. I think we really, most of the appraisals that come through, they can be anywhere. We have, we're seeing some new developments uptown that are doing well. Downtown and as you were mentioning, kind of the gold standard neighborhoods, there's always some activity. I would say probably where we're seeing the fewest deals is probably not Turtle Bay, but Sutton Place, Sutton, Beekman.
Oh, yeah.
And,
That's a
parts
very-
of the Midtown
That's a
East.
very small,
Yeah.
enclave of,
Exactly.
it has movement and it doesn't have movement. I get it.
So, I mean, I don't think I
Beacon
haven't really
Place.
seen any particular neighborhoods that I would say are dead, in terms of the activity. And again, it all, relates back to where are the prices and have sellers readjusted those prices, because that can lead to a flurry of activity. But I think that, those particular neighborhoods are probably where we see the slowest activity.
I've been shocked to see the lack of activity in Harlem, actually.
Correct.
Which side?
And
West.
West Harlem, townhouses, things are lingering on the market for
Yeah.
a long time. And
Yeah.
Too expensive.
what occurred to me is that
Well, like everything
it's-
else, that bubble keeps getting bigger, and I think that's exactly
it's been a bit
what's
of a anywhere that's really like a strong value play.
Yep.
When that's gotten most impacted by rates. And I think that's ultimately as rates
really good
subside and people,
Yeah.
because there was a flurry of people going from the Upper West Side to West Harlem because it's so convenient and you can and
Nice new condo
and great
developments there.
restaurant, everything is great.
Everything,
and then there was just this pause.
Yep.
I think a lot of sellers, want to sell. And they're just reluctant to go into this market. And, I'm having lots of conversations. When's the right time, Scott? When's the right time? And we're just kind of looking at it. So it's an extension of the Upper West Side.
It's always been, but the past several years, decade or so at least, it's gotten even more of an extension of the Upper West Side. It's a beautiful area, but I think the prices got a little out of hand. Just like
The
anywhere
expansion of
else.
Columbia contributed to that, right?
Well, absolutely. And, things happen. But I want to ask you, though, Scott, foreign buyers, are you seeing a lot of international foreign buyers come through again? And I was talking to somebody before the show. They never really went away, but they really kind of stopped buying, more so than domestic
The Chinese
buyers.
and the Russians did kind of go away for a little while.
They did, but are you seeing an influx in that again or no?
I will say that foreign buyers in many cases get kind of painted with this brush. Oh, they don't know what they're doing and they just make these crazy purchases. I've found that foreign buyers right now, the active foreign buyers, are so savvy. And so they're coming into the market like, Scott, I'm taking a look.
Yeah.
And it looks cheap to me. Their currency may be strong.
Well, depending on
where
what the
they're coming
currency
from.
is, correct.
Yeah.
And so you've got your buyers who kind of dove into Miami because Miami got hot. They made some money and it's such a volatile market. But New York is so slow and steady that a lot of investors just say, I just want to own a piece of Manhattan and it feels cheap to me. And so like we have buyers coming in later this week, next week. People are in town. Usually they're on vacation, and they're trying to make a purchase at the same time. But they're not overly pressured to do it. But I think a lot of buyers, or foreign buyers in particular, are feeling like Manhattan is on sale. And I don't disagree. I mean, I really think we're in some cases, depending on price point, I think we're kind of past the bottom.
I actually kind of like that. And Manhattan on sale. So with that, we're going to take a break. We're coming right back. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. We're going to talk about rentals and, more importantly, what all of our predictions are as we go from August of 2024 through the end of the year. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. Don't go anywhere.
This podcast is supported by the More Network, powered by Brown Harris Stevens. Real estate touches every aspect of our lives, from design and architecture to investing and the economy. Now there's a way to get all your real estate information in one place, the More Network. With more than 20 podcast and webcast series, the Mastery of Real Estate Network is powered by Brown Harris Stevens, one of the country's most distinguished brokerages. Discover advice from notable entrepreneurs, compelling topics, and access to top global real estate experts. Subscribe to their YouTube and Apple podcast channels by visiting getmorenetwork.com.
I want to talk a little bit about the rental market. As I said at the top of the show, post-pandemic, people coming back into the city or whatever all of that represents, we've seen prices on the rental market skyrocket. I mean, inventory depleted. The rental market continues, in my opinion. We had a little bit of a slowdown, continues to zoom and boom. Tracie, what is still driving that increase in price and people wanting to be here?
A number of things, Vince. I would say there have been a lot of renewals. There's not been a lot of new product coming on because
Right.
a lot of tenants are just staying. It was easier. It's so expensive to get into a place. We have a couple of listings for different landlords of ours that we have rather optimistically raised the rent, and all of the tenants, with that exception, after a little pushback, have said, nope, we'll take this additional $1,000 a month or whatever it might be, depending on the price point. I also think that because things are so confusing on the buyer's side market, that a lot of people are opting to continue to rent. And most of the new construction, although you guys please correct me if I'm wrong, I think is still focused on the condo market as opposed to a lot of new rental market. So there's not as much new rental inventory, new rental product coming on that there might be for the demand. So those are my kind of quick takes.
And do you see that continuing to trend rather up, or do you see it flattening out at some point, or at some point when the interest rates, either go down or at least get frozen where they are? Do you think more renters are going to say, hey, okay, now is my time. Now I'm going to get out there. Now I need to buy something.
I'm not mad about that. If the rents do stay at this current level, it is inevitably, no matter what's going on with the purchase side or interest rates or that kind of thing, it is going to push people to buy again. So I do see that, but I don't think, again, I'm open to everyone else's opinion, but I don't see that a continued increase like this is sustainable on the rental side right now.
Scott, what are the challenges? I mean, we know interest rates are the elephant in the room. We know inventory, kind of fluctuates up and down. We understand, people, first-time buyers anyway, are kind of staying in their rental units because they really can't afford at the moment to buy. But what other challenges might there be out there for people who want to buy in New York City? I mean, another personal story, but when I was, younger and buying apartments, I owned 7 apartments in this town, one after the other after the other. And the thing is, the markets weren't always great for buyers. The markets weren't always great for sellers. And I was a seller every time I sold something, I bought something else. But my opinion was, and maybe it's naive, but my opinion was, look, if you need to sell, sell. If you need to buy, buy. Who cares? What's the big deal?
Who cares?
So what? Who cares? Hashtag. But it's true, right? So all of a sudden the drama over this and the drama over that. And people ask all the time, why is the market so crazy? When, as I said earlier, Westchester is on fire. Connecticut, where my brother lives, beyond on fire. Wildfire. Incredible. What's the deal? What are the challenges?
Well,
I know, mouthful.
In 5 minutes or less, Scott.
The challenge, and I'm sure I've talked about it here before, but one of the big challenges, I think, for buyers is doing work. There's a big unknown.
Sure.
And you sort of, again, stack all of these other uncertainties right now, and you look at what is the cost of doing a bath, a kitchen. If you're buying a 1-bedroom apartment, and it's very expensive, and you have to do the bathroom, you can't live there. So what do you do? And how long is it going to take? And co-ops, you add what that's, and not to mention, look, my buddy was complaining to me that he has 2 dogs that he loves, and he goes to the vet, and he feels like he's constantly being upsold by the vet. The medicine, do you want another shot of this? Everyone's like, I can't get out of the vet.
Not a good puppy father.
I can't get out of the vet for less than, X amount, a couple $100.
Somebody told me last week, $600 in the vet for nonsense.
Right. And people, there's a little bit of mistrust out there about what is the renovation going to cost. And so they're going to have to find a contractor to do the work. So I think that's a big unknown. And there's so much property. I agree. The number of properties on the market is a reasonable number if you're looking to buy. However, what's the condition of that property? And I think that is a huge factor.
It's huge.
And you just talk about what are the expectations of buyers. And I think buyers maybe back down their expectations of what it's going to look like. But we've gotten very used to looking at property online. And it looks beautiful. Every single property that's whether it's renovated or not has virtual staging. Mm-hmm. They go in and it's depressing. And so I think buyers are just trying to, again, it's just so much to get over the hump that we talked about. I think it was Frederick Peters. I can't remember who made this comment, but I've heard it from other people. But
he's a character.
Is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller market? No, it's a broker's market. This is a market where you really have to have a good advisor to sort of help you think through what those costs are, but buyers are overwhelmed. And I think to the extent that we can lower the temperature, help them see what does the timeline look like, I think people are going to be able to make more decisions, but it's a lot to digest.
And to your point a little bit about the resale market and the apartments that need work, I think people in general, the consumer now is very commitment phobic. because it is a long-term commitment. A mortgage is 30 years.
Not just
That's
in buying
a long
houses,
time.
my friend.
You know what I'm saying? So they're afraid of making the wrong choice. They're also afraid of taking the ugly duckling, right? They want that apartment. If they're going to transition from a rental apartment, they are renters, and we're talking specifically only about first timers. If they are renters now, they want that first purchase to be their perfect apartment. And that perfect apartment is a visual aesthetic. And I really think this has changed entirely.
Right. I mean, you could look at, like, I have a much younger brother who, who's all of his friends are getting married. And I love all his friends. And they're like, I got engaged. I'm getting married in 2.5 years. You're like, what's going on? Yes, I agree with you. I think
why
there's
wait?
a,
I bet you
why are you waiting?
I
What are you waiting
bet you
for?
that they found their future spouses on an app that they were searching through a catalog that is a visual catalog, right? And I think that
We are in
sort
a
of
very visual business.
behavior changed how people purchased properties. I really do think fundamentally.
Well, I think I think the advent of social media, I think the advent of these dating apps, I think the advent of everything visual has made us more visual, including looking for homes. And Scott's right. All these virtual staged apartments. The only problem I have with virtual staged apartments is when people walk in and they say, "What happened to the furniture? Did the seller move out again?" And I'm like, "Did you read the text in bold letters?
thing has been virtually
This is
staged."
virtually staged." No one reads.
And the staging has gotten really good.
It's gotten really good. Absolutely,
It's
it has.
photorealistic. Yeah.
It really is. Talk a little bit about the differences between co-ops and condos. One of you mentioned before that, the condo market is, and to Scott's point, newer, doesn't necessarily need the renovations. But, when we take our buyers to a lot of these co-ops, which are beautiful buildings, but they're older and people have lived in them for many, many years, they need work.
And they might not have central air conditioning or the number
central
one
air conditioning,
prerequisite
that's a
washer
luxury.
dryer units in the apartment.
Right. And not allowed to be. I live in a pre-war building. I can't put central air in my unit, and I can't put washer dryer in my unit. As much as I say, please, I want to do it.
We have a beautifully gut renovated 2-bedroom for $900,000 on East 70th Street, 2-bedroom, 1-bath. That
Sell, girl.
they do
Sell,
not
sell,
allow
sell.
washer dryer units, and that has stopped probably 80% of the would-be visitors.
The
from
market
coming
these
because of
days,
that.
people want those luxuries. They want those amenities. And when they look at brand new condos, it's, a given.
You can
It's
have
all
it in
part of
most other cities in the United States. It's,
Well, I know.
it's what's a given there is a luxury here. But I also actually
Well,
want
we
to go
have
back.
old plumbing in this town. We can't deal with some of the, the things that these newer buildings or places outside of the city can do.
Sure. But something that, Scott, you said at the beginning of the show that we didn't really focus so much on, the assessments. There are so many more assessments and maintenance increases, and that is absolutely impacting the price more of co-ops, I think, even than the condos,
No,
the
you're
newer
right.
condos. The same apartment has a very expensive assessment for 2 brand new elevators, which is fantastic, and they're doing it right. One is out while the other's being worked, one is being worked on and one is out. So you're not without any elevators, but we would have priced it closer to $1 million, probably just under, if not for these assessments, and it's $900.
Correct. But are the sellers in agreement with that?
Absolutely, they listen to us.
Okay, great. That's all it comes down to.
They don't always listen, but these did.
No, they don't. But things like assessments, increases in maintenance these days, and real estate taxes,
Everywhere.
flip taxes. I mean, we have additional monthly costs these days that really didn't exist in the past. So, my opinion, one of the challenges in getting this market re-stimulated for first-time buyers more than anybody is getting past all of those increases. I mean, in one of the buildings that I sell in almost exclusively, 15% increase in maintenance. And
Where's that coming from? Yeah.
and why? And plus, they have an assessment because they're finishing the roof work. They're now going to do. They even got not even there yet. But now they're going to do the elevators. One at a time. There isn't a flip tax, but I wouldn't be surprised if at one point there is a flip tax. So all these extra monthly costs have become almost prohibitive for first-time buyers.
Michael, how much of that is factored into the appraisals? Do you look into assessments and maintenance increases and things like that too for value?
Yeah, we do. I mean, I think, one of the reasons why, I think there's still a good, chunk of this market that's overvalued is because of the rising cost of everything, including, maintenance, for example, goes to cover building expenses. And it's the building operating expenses that have gone up during this period of inflation. So everything costs more. Insurance is
Energy.
Yeah. Insurance, fuel,
Yeah.
labor costs.
Yeah.
Nothing has gone down. And then if you add in, assessments for capital improvements and repairs that, are going to last a year or two, and then on top of that, you're paying, higher mortgage rate. So all of that, is factored into, a buyer, feeling kind of non-commit, not ready to make a commitment because they're kind of faced with all of these, higher costs. And so if you look at a price and you still think, well, okay, that sort of looks like a decent price based on comparables or what I've researched, if you're a buyer looking at Street Easy for comps and things, but then you start factoring, okay, what's it going to cost me on a monthly basis? That begins, where can you find the savings? You're not going to you can't bank on maintenance going down 10% or 20% while you're owning this.
Somebody said
You
it
can
before.
only
What goes
figure-
up never comes down.
That's right. So maintenance never goes in the other direction.
No.
Assessments are sometimes ongoing. And even on the condo side, the building expenses and the common charges that cover those have all increased. So those are higher. Real estate taxes are higher. Your ability to deduct those taxes are capped at $10,000. So you're just always, hit with all of these costs, and you're trying to figure out, where are you going to find the savings? It's got to be at the purchase price.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. All right, let's talk. We have a few minutes left. Let's talk about predictions. Scott, where do we go from August of 2024, where we are now, to the end of the year, in your opinion?
It's one of the most interesting and weird moments because you have a couple things happening right now. You've got the election, which has been unbelievably noisy, and you have the NAR,
noisy, I like that.
the NAR
Settlement.
Yeah.
starting to go into effect.
Yeah.
So buyers. So I mean, what do I think? I think it's really predicated on rates. If rates start to tick down a little bit, I think buyers will be encouraged. And I think it's up to the brokerage community to really step up and be educated and help guide them. But I think ultimately we're going to end the year probably about flat to where we are with much more activity. And I think people can't wait forever to buy.
I
And
100% agree
There's
with
this
that.
backlog. People can't, obviously, if you want to buy a house in the suburbs and you're renting here, you're not the buyer. But there are other people who want to buy here. And at some point, like the dam breaks. And I think we'll start to see a little bit of that.
Jordan, predictions.
I tend to actually agree. I don't think that we're going to see a significant decrease, which ordinarily we would have in a presidential election year. But I think that there's so many factors in play. I just think we stay absolutely stable. I don't actually think that we will decrease significantly. We might see little spikes, right? Flurry of activity might get a little frothy, but overall,
Frothy's
we're
not
just
bad.
we'll stick with our current trend line until the end of the year.
Tracie, Hamersley.
There, you know my name. We're really good friends. I like to be a dissenting voice, but I have to agree. It's spot on. I'll be interested to see if, say, February, maybe after everything is cleared, we have an inauguration. There is always the uncertainty that comes with the volatility of any election year, not even factoring in everything else that you had mentioned, Scott. But yeah, I agree. I think flat with hopefully more activity because we will see, at least in September perhaps, some interest rate drop.
We can only be hopeful. Michael, predictions.
He only looks backwards, though.
Exactly. Yeah.
Speak to it.
Yeah, can we talk about
What are you gonna see in
Can we
6
talk
months?
about January or February? We do live in interesting times. I mean, the last 6 to 8 weeks have been kind of mind blowing in terms of things that are outside of real estate. We're probably in for a period of severe or kind of elevated volatility. I think in the financial markets, they've probably recovered today, but we might see more days like yesterday where there's kind of a pullback on news, on some kind of news.
Yep.
We're also interconnected globally. That if the Nikkei goes down 15% in a day, it's going to have reverberation. So I think we're going to be in a period of volatility in the financial markets, in the political sphere. There's concerns about more war and all of that stuff. So, we're probably going to see buyers doing what they've been doing, which is, kind of
sleeping at the wheel.
Yes. Even though it's your question was about, it's a buyer's market. Why don't buyers buy? So, they're looking for prices to be lower, and they're looking for a little bit more certainty in the market. And life. And I don't think they're going to get that in the next, 4 or 5 months. So we're just going to see more of the same, which is, sellers wondering why their properties are not selling, even though they've reduced the prices, and buyers wondering why things aren't better for them, even though it's a buyer's market. And then, we'll see where we go from there after, what's hopefully a smooth inauguration and transition.
I like your word life, and I like Scott's word noise, and I agree with all of you as a matter of fact. But you know what? Frothy. As far as life is concerned, if I have a choice of my martini and anything else, I'm going to go for my martini. 1 minute left. Scott has a podcast on our network, the More Network here. Scott, tell us quickly about your podcast, what it's called, where to find it, and what you talk about.
Okay. Well, the pursuit of home, the way I describe it, is real people buying real estate. So we're dealing with all of the psychological, all of the emotional issues that are behind the scenes that no one talks about. What are they going through? I mean, that's all I'm thinking about is the human aspect that doesn't show up on social media. So we're having conversations. What are these little things that people are going through?
Unvarnished reality.
What's that?
The unvarnished reality.
The reality.
The actual reality. The actual reality.
I love that name, Pursuit of Home.
Yeah. So that's really what we're dealing with. And then we bring in people to talk about certain elements. So, somebody's, kind of talking about how they turn decluttering their home into like this act of service. Then we're meeting with an actual organizer to talk about how this is true for lots of people and how you can really, that's just one example. But people are going through all sorts of stuff, and we talk, every episode's a little bit different take on these.
I listen. It's a great show. You should take a listen on the More Network.
Can I say one
available
quick thing,
whenever?
Vince?
Sure.
Just to quote my girl Taylor, you can always move to Florida and buy the car you want. Florida is still a very exciting market as the Florida
Madame
broker in the
Florida
room.
over here to my right. Madame Florida.
We're
sad
talking
to say.
New York real estate. Yes.
Yes.
But come on, it's the sixth borough of New York. It is all connected.
Yes,
We're all
it
family
is.
here.
All right, listen, we're way over time. We're coming right back with my thoughts for the week. Don't go anywhere. Okay, everybody, we are back with my closing thoughts for this week. The National Association of Realtors recently agreed to a significant settlement amounting to $418 million to resolve multiple class action lawsuits over real estate commission practices. This settlement addresses claims that the NAR's rules inflated buyer broker commissions, resulting in higher costs for home sellers. The settlement includes several key changes and how commissions are handled in real estate transactions. One of the main changes is the elimination of the requirement for listing brokers to offer compensation to buyers brokers. The National Association of Realtor members and MLS users must implement these changes by August 17th. This shift is expected to alter the dynamics of how agents get paid, potentially reducing overall commission cost and affecting the real estate industry significantly. The settlement also mandates that agents working with buyers must now enter into written agreements with their clients before touring properties, ensuring clarity and transparency regarding compensation. While this settlement resolves litigation brought by home sellers, separate lawsuits that are being filed by home buyers will continue. The changes are seen as a move to increase fairness in real estate transactions, although some experts predict it could lead to a decline in the number of practicing real estate agents due to reduced commission revenues. I'm keeping an eye on this, and we will report so much more after August 17th. And that's our broadcast for today. Thanks to my guests for being here on set with me. You can follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, or TikTok at Vince Rocco, or my website, thinkvince.com. Nelson Mandela said, "The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but rising every time you do fall." And from all of us here at Talking New York Real Estate and the More Network, to all of you all around the world, thanks for spending a part of your day with us, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.